So realized vol has continued to make new lows. Spot ranges becoming narrower, as I said. So we've got ETH 10-day realized plummeting below 20 as 1850 spot level just seems to be impossible to shake right now. And then BTC realizes a few points higher. Implied vols did have a brief uptick last week as Bitcoin tried to test 30K. That was in this move here about a week ago. ETH didn't really manage to rally quite as much. But anyway, once the move got faded and rejected, you can see implied vols came back down again, and realized vols just fallen off a cliff, right? So that's the yellow line here. Carry is back to around 10 vols. So you can see that here in these big red bars, just because realized is dropping faster than implied. And then the summer lull just kind of continues. It seems that owning gamma at record lows is a fast way to get wrecked, a term that is quite commonly used in crypto. And therefore, I prefer to focus on the longer end of the curve, as I have been doing lately. We'll talk a bit more about that later. Okay, looking at term structure. So you can see term structure kind of continuing to shift down, not seeing quite as dramatic moves as we saw last week, but we do still see the back end under pressure, 3 vols lower. The front end is sub 30 on Bitcoin, so it's not dropping quite as hard now. But really that back end, even June 24, losing 3.5 vols, which is quite a decent move in the back. But like I say, dramatic moves last week on ETH where it was down like 7-8 vols. You can see similar moves to Bitcoin curve, long end down 3.5, front end down like 1. Just kind of moving more in line with Bitcoin this week as it didn't have quite as much overwhelming flow coming on the sell side as we saw last week. Front end's at 25 though, now in terms of ETH, about as low as I've ever seen it. It looks like an equity vol right now, but we've realized vol closer to 15, and those systematic sellers just keep on coming. Hard to really see when and if this thing is going to bounce at all. So, you know, like I say, I'm not focusing on short end vol. Better off focusing on long end where you've got more chance of mean reversion at some point. Okay, looking at the relative value curve between ETH and Bitcoin vol, we've seen a bit of a smoothing out here. The green line is a much smoother profile. We've got -3 on the spread in the front and about -5 in the back. Our view does remain unchanged. We think there's massive long-term value in Ethereum vol in the back end of the curve. You know, same story as last week. We haven't even changed it. The market does perceive the bullish drivers to be coming from Bitcoin in the next 6 to 9 months. And that is why we are where we are. And we do think value hunters need to be really thinking about owning some Ethereum vol longer term. And we have started to see those flows in the market, actually. We still struggle to see a scenario where Bitcoin is going to get above 40K and ETH's going to do nothing. We think ETH is going to reprice higher as well. But in the near term, while Bitcoin can't break ranges either, then it looks like, you know, the flows, the systematic gamma sellers are kind of keeping the market pinned here for the time being. Okay, jump over to SKEW. Bitcoin SKEW practically unchanged on the week, remains at 3 to 4 vol call premium across the curve. ETH SKEW starting to see some demand come in. We saw, you can see that move down there is basically some call bids coming in the long end of ETH. So particularly the 1 week and 6 week buckets are going back towards more neutral SKEW, whereas the middle of the curve is losing some of its put premium, but still has a slight put premium of 1 to 1.5 vols. The extreme divergence in SKEW between Bitcoin and ETH is indicative of stronger sentiment towards Bitcoin. We continue to see that this is not being confirmed by any material underperformance in ETH spot. Again, same story as last week. There were those nerves around curve in the DeFi space, but it has not led to Ethereum breaking below supports. If anything, we think that the spot holding up despite BTC being the dominant narrative is actually quite bullish for Ethereum, right? The fact that all the potential optimism is in Bitcoin, but yet ETH can't break down on a relative basis, I see that as actually quite positive price action, right? So that's something to bear in mind. Okay, dashboard wise, we have seen, because the ranges are shrinking, the Bollinger Bands don't mean as much anymore, right? So you can see a tightening of the Bollinger Band. So I wouldn't read too much right now into the spot signal. So on this strategy compass, remember this axis is dependent on Bollinger Bands. So if the Bollinger Bands are nice and wide, then it's meaningful. If the Bollinger Bands are really, really tight, then whether you are on this side or on this side, doesn't have too much weight attached to it, basically, right? So just bear that in mind. So anyway, nothing really to say from the strategy compass. Similar story in Ethereum. Okay, looking at the flows, options volumes were stable in Bitcoin, but they were dominated by call buying. We saw short-dated call buying to play this grayscale ruling against the SEC. So we're seeing which expires is it? 18th of August, which is the blues here, and 25th of August. So super short-dated calls in the 30K to 32K area. The longer dated flows are still coming. October 34 calls, December 38 calls, and March 40 calls. Big clips trading there. And then probably the largest, most interesting trade is the calendar trade between DEC 23 and March 24. That's a misprint there, March 24. That is a calendar being bought because people are thinking that the true ETF decision isn't going to come until after this year is over. So the way you get into that event is by selling December and buying March. And basically you're going to be long the part of the curve that's going to contain the event that's going to be game changing. It's going to suck in a load of institutional flow. So that seems to be an event trade that people are going after to try and play the steepening of that curve. And we think that makes a lot of sense. We mentioned that trade in our boot camp to the people that we trained up a week or two ago. We were basically saying that, yeah, when you see events on the horizon, the way you capture those events is by doing calendar trades. And if and as you get closer to those events, the calendar tends to steepen quite dramatically as that event becomes on everyone's radar. We think that's what's going on in Bitcoin right now. Ethereum option volumes after the previous week's massive calendar roll have dropped back a bit. Bullish bias continues though. We saw clips of October 2000 and 2300, so that's these big pink bars. We saw outright calls being bought as well, longer dated in DEC and March from 2500 all the way up to 5000 strikes. Some of it call spreads as well. And then a bullish risk reversal was traded in DEC, selling the 15 puts to buy the 2500 puts, but 2500 calls, sorry, right? So that was a bullish, risky people trying to fund some of the upside that they're buying there. Gamma positioning, as we've been mentioning, has been drifting higher. So you saw a little downtick as we tested 30K, flip back into positive. So Bitcoin, you can see where the strikes are coming from, but 29, 29.5 and 30K strikes are clearly long strikes for the dealers. On expiries 18th of August and 25th of August. That is providing this long gamma. We could see that actually growing and going even higher into expiry end of this week, end of next week. If we do get above 31K, that's where you've got short strikes. I don't see that happening in the near term, which probably means we're going to have quite a lot of resistance at 30K still. Ethereum, similar story. Gamma positioning has been drifting higher after a little brief downtick around expiry. The big strike is 1900, but we also see longs on the 2000 and even the 2100. And those longs, you can see their light blue bars are actually September. So whilst you've got short dated stuff in August, you've also got September, and they're all long strikes because we've seen a lot of that overwriting in September. So we definitely think that ETH is behaving very pinned, explains why the realized vol is so low. And right now, without some fundamental news to shake it away from these strikes are going to dominate, and they're going to make it hard for Ethereum to move. If we move down, there's probably less holding this market, but around here and slightly higher, there's a fair amount of long exposure, which is going to make it hard for ETH to really participate and do much unless we get some real game-changing news. That's the summary for this week in crypto. Thanks a lot. As always, I'll catch you guys later.